Hey there, everyone. You're listening to No Bed of Roses. Welcome back, everyone. Today's guest is Corey Tocchini, founder and CEO of BeforeTheMovie, but also a member of the Tocchini family that is 3 generations deep in the independent movie theater business. Corey shares some great stories of his family's history, dating back to 1924 and taking us all the way through the current challenges that exhibitors are facing with the pandemic. I really enjoyed my time with Corey, and I hope you will too. So here's Corey. It's magic.
Oh, you have special sounds and everything?
Look at that. You know who you sound like? You sound like John Goodman.
You know what? You know how many times I hear that?
You sound exactly like John Goodman, like Sully.
It's so funny because I can tell you I was at a meeting in LA with one of the studios and there was like 15 of us sitting around and all of a sudden the guy goes, I figured it out. You sound just like John Goodman.
Oh my gosh, you do.
The guys I was with were with me started laughing. So I told you. It's
pretty impressive, man. You got another career right there for you.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do voiceover for Pixar.
Yeah. Perfect. It worked out pretty well for him. Would you say you were born into the old school exhibition portion of the movie business?
I would say, yeah.
You grew up in the business, no?
Oh, yeah. My grandfather built the first talkie theater in the county I grew up in 1924. He actually was a developer, contractor. He'd come out from Italy, and then he ended up settling in a little town called Sebastopol, California. And he developed a lot of that town. A lot of the subdivisions and stuff just came over here basically with nothing and worked his tail off and built these subdivisions. And a couple of guys came to him. We think they were mafia and said, hey, we want you to build us a theater in Santa Rosa. So he built the theater. Within a few months, they went broke. So he took over the theater and ended up putting sound in it, kind of an accidental theater owner. And then he stayed with it. And then my dad, when he was about 18 or 19, got in and got the Anley Theater in Sebastopol with his nephew. And they ran that theater for a while. And then my dad, did the same thing my grandfather did, had these, little single screens. This is how they started, where I'd say big single screens up and down the coast, these old theaters. And then, eventually grew from there.
Your grandfather came from where in Italy?
He came from right next to Lucca, a little town or a little village called Porcari.
Where is this in the boots? Tell me, where is this?
It is in Tuscany.
Oh, Toscana.
So, yeah, Florence, Pisa.
Yes. Siena.
Lucca, the Great Walled City. Lucca is like, let's see, it would be like going from Thousand Oaks to Westlake Village. It's close. It was like
very
6-7 miles. Porcari was 6-7 miles from Lucca. Not very far.
Well, why did your grandfather go to Sebastopol? What was in Sebastopol?
I don't know. He came out with another family member, and one settled in San Francisco and got in the grocery business, produce. And then my grandfather came up, and he worked with his hands. He was a builder, and he ended up in Sebastopol. And I don't think they ever got along. Those two brothers. And so he ended up here, got married to my grandmother was from Pisa. They came out here and they were young. They went to Ellis Island and then ended up over here.
Didn't change the family name? Tocchini?
No.
They got that part right.
He used to go back to the village when after he was a success here. He went back, he used to bring money back to Porcari and for the villagers. So he'd make trips back there and bring money and take care of them, there's great stories. I've been back there and a friend of ours brought us around, you can go to the church where his name's in the registry. You listen to the old timers and they said, he was they loved him. Anybody that came here was able to get out and then come back and take care of them. We're basically heroes.
All right. So we're in Sebastopol and he builds a theater for these guys. It goes belly up. And he's in the exhibition business. And
he takes over a theater.
Takes over a theater. Single screen, Corey, how many seats?
Yeah, at that time, a single screen, I don't know. I'm guessing it probably had, maybe 400 or 500.
Pretty big. And is it one of the old school opulent theaters with that's a real showplace, or is it not? pretty.
I mean, for the time, there were the vaudevillian ones that did, also did plays and organ and all that. It wasn't one of those, but it was an old time theater. That building is still there. It's used different stuff. In fact, it says it's the Tocchini building.
Really?
Yeah, in Santa Rosa. And then, my dad built a theater there basically in my grandfather's honor, called it the Roxy, which is what the theater was called in the 20s. And that's a 14 screen, 2-story monster downtown, not on the site where the other one was, but not far away.
But in tribute to your grandfather, your father did that.
Yes.
And so did they start Corey as true independents, or were they affiliated with a studio at that point?
No, they were indie. They were independent. They were on their own. Other guys like Richard Mann, who owned theaters very similar, these little theaters up and down the coast and in the valley.
Is that Man of the Man's Chinese?
Different
Man. Okay.
Yeah. Just a guy that had been around for, a long time. And I grew up, there was the Sayufi Boys, which was Century, the Anias, who were part of United Artists, the Nafis rather, and the Anias, which were related. In fact, the Nafis are related to Sayufis. It's a funny business. It looks really big, but it really isn't. It seems big if you're coming from the outside, but it's a very, we call it incestuous business. Everybody seems to know everybody, or they're related, or, so it's a small business. If you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. If you do the handshake still exists in this business.
Even to this day?
Yeah. Obviously not quite as much. It's such a litigious society that you get everything on paper, but basically, I have deals. I have a few circuits that basically it's handshake. I just try to do what we say we're going to do. And if we can't, we're in constant communication with them.
Okay, so this family-run business, and it seems like they're original families. That lineage can be traced to present day, where we're in the middle of this pandemic. We've heard unprecedented again and again and again. Your grandfather opened on the other side of World War I, not too much before the Depression.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I can tell you, I've had people come up to me in Santa Rosa saying, your grandfather used to give me, a suit. I'd go clean the windows or clean the poster windows or whatever at the theater, and he'd give me a suit or give him clothes. That's the way they did it. They bartered. They did things. Nobody had money. That's how, they'd tell me. It's the weirdest thing. They would just tell me, yeah, well, he would give me clothing or something. I'd help work at the theater.
I mean, he opens Corey in pretty decent times, but obviously we already know these guys who started it went bust. Your grandfather takes it over. Depression hits. Nobody does have money, as I understand.
Can you imagine not having 5 or 6 cents to go to the movies?
Right. I mean, I thought it was coming with us here. I was preparing the hotel that I was running. We were preparing a soup kitchen setup, for the community, because if you remember, nobody knew how well the supply chain would hold. I mean, it was pretty funky for a while.
Who knew we were going to run out of toilet paper?
Toilet paper, exactly. But when all the meat processing plants were just getting crushed with COVID outbreaks, and so people, okay, well, if we don't have guys bringing in the crops and we don't have guys working in the processing plants, how are we getting food? Okay, so we go back almost 100 years. Did your grandfather think of just getting out of the theater business, or was it was viable even through the Depression?
I can't tell you that because I never had a specific conversation with him about that, but he stayed in it and worked it. Now, he was also building homes, but back then during the Depression, I don't know, how many homes, and, he had this property because he ended up at some point gathering enough wealth where he could buy this property and build a subdivision or build so many houses, buy some more property, build so many. It's funny, even during tough times, theaters have always excelled and done well because people still need an escape, and really for the money isn't as bad. Now it's pricier now, but everything's relative, but it's pricier now, but they're trying to deliver these bigger films. They're trying to make the studios want these films to be tentpole pictures, to be big pictures, evenings out. They have gone up. The pricing has gone up, but even in tough times, theaters seem to do well. Now, with COVID, obviously, it's a little different. I tell you, they still have not had one case worldwide trace back to a movie theater.
That's interesting.
And there's theaters that have been open, China and other places, and not one that they've definitively traced back to a movie theater. Because people, if you think about it, are generally quiet. They're facing forward. They're facing the same direction watching a movie. Plus, they've put in, ahead of time, there's spacing requirements. And they've done stuff with the ventilation in most of these places. They have what's called cinema safe. So they're taking all the protocols. But in a lot of cases, like in California, the governor never gave them a chance to open. And they were sued in many states saying, you show me, we want to see some kind of evidence, some scientific evidence that you're at risk when you go to a theater, or higher risk when you go to a theater, as opposed to going to Walmart or Target or wherever else, these essential, in quote, businesses, right?
So they got the one theater, and then what makes your grandfather go, you know what, this is a pretty good business?
Go buy another one.
Is that, or I'll build another one? Is that what?
Built another one. Most of the cases, I don't know if he built the Anley. He might have built the Anley in Sebastopol. I have to look that up. But most of these cases, these theaters were. Remember, this was a period of time. So when you start getting into the 30s and 40s and 50s, he was buying these theaters. He'd find these little, one horse town, and there'd be a single screen theater, and maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people in the town, or 3,000, and it was the hub of the town. Back then, the movie theater was, and to some extent it still is today. It is the place that people go to gather, have a communal movement on a movie. They sit there, and where everything graduates at the same time, they're experiencing it all together at the same time. So that still holds true. In those days, that was it. You were a long way away from the next town. So town you were in, if that local movie theater was your hub, it employed your friends, your families, your neighbors. Everybody knew everybody. You saw each other all the time there.
Not only that, Corey, but I mean, I remember the stories from my parents and grandparents where you were a kid, you were dropped off at 9 a.m, and you were picked up at maybe 5 in the evening, and you spent the entire day watching the cartoons, the serials, the whole. I mean, you were, if that was $1, it was a ton of money. You were in that theater all day long, and they were the first places many times that were air conditioned. So that was the only place that you could go to cool off.
Plus, there were big barns. They didn't get real hot. Some of these theaters are tubes from the ones they built in the 70s, and they're small inside. These things were, a lot of them were mausoleums.
Absolutely. I remember fondly the RKO Keiths and Main Street Flushing in New York, and it was a vaudeville house, Corey, and it was extraordinary. Even when I was a kid, still extraordinary, still beautiful. Developer came in and gutted it overnight. Totally illegal, but now it's gone forever. And Marx Brothers had played there, had a lot of the famous vaudeville acts that went through there. And it was the gathering place for the community, as you said. So now,
you mentioned a Man earlier.
Man's Chinese
in LA.
Yeah.
That theater, that was Ted Mann, who was married to Rhonda Fleming, a famous, I'll say B actress, but well known at the time in her day. In fact, I think Rhonda's still alive. Ted passed away, but Ted's grandson is Johnny Brendan. I have his theaters. So when I say it's incestuous, everybody's connected. Johnny Brendan has 8 or 9 locations throughout California, Arizona, and Nevada. He has the Palms Casino, the theater in there as well. And we do their pre-shows and, produce all the stuff that is in between the movies for them. And Johnny was Ted's grandson, and Rhonda and him are still close.
It stays in the family, or pretty damn close to the family.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah. Okay. So this scales, and you show up. Are you an usher? Do you work the concession stand? What do you do?
I would run the projection booth. I was 12 years old. I was running the projection booth. My mother used to give my dad fits. You can't let him. Those are dangerous. Those carbon arcs.
Carbon arc, yeah.
You were firing off carbon arcs, so sometimes mirrors would explode. I'd run the projection booth, go downstairs, help my dad. I'd sell, and I got paid. I remember at one point he got paid $1.35 an hour, and he told my mom he's lucky he's getting anything.
That's right. Old school. I like it.
I give him a roof over his head. Damn it.
That's right.
But you know what, man? That's where we learned, right?
Yeah, you grew up in the theater. There was a beautiful theater that was down the street from my house, Corey, in Queens, there was the Mayfair Theater, Art Deco, with the 2 projector system. It had been turned into a porn theater in the 70s, still built out and beautiful. And I used to go and hang out with a projectionist, and he taught me, I still remember the dowser and the pedals on the floor and the carbon arcs and the buckets full of the spent carbon and
exciter lamp,
the whole deal.
The soundtrack.
Yes, you had to splice it, Corey, and they were using these mirror. You couldn't look at the arc, right? So he bounced the light onto the wall. They had these 2 Sharpie marks on the wall, and that's how you crank the arc. You crank the carbon together, right, to get the proper arc. And then, have you seen Mank yet? Have you seen the movie Mank about Herman Mankiewicz? Have you seen that?
No. I haven't.
Oh, it's really cool. One of the sort of the cool things that I geek out over this, it's really beautiful. They did it in black and white, is that even though it's a Netflix original, they put projectionist cues in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah.
Just to make you
give it the effect.
Just to take it back.
So to give you an idea, I was running a theater in the 70s for my dad, and I was young. The way they paid you is he said, okay, well, I'm going to give you a house allowance. This is what it costs to run the theater. You get your payroll and everything, and then what's left over you get. So I would clean the theater. So it was great until you had a movie like Star Wars. We opened Star Wars in San Carlos, and I was running the Laurel Theater. I ran the theater. So we'd open up at 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And this was a single screen 900 seat theater, and we'd run it all day long. So I'd manage the floor. I'd run the projectors. I would do, at that time, we would splice 3 reels together, 6,000 feet of film on each one. We'd splice them together so the movie fit on these 2 big reels, and there's one changeover. I could do that changeover just by audio. I didn't even have to look at I ran it over 657 times.
Yeah.
I take that back. I saw it.
Yeah, right.
It ran for weeks. I saw it. I had marks on the wall of how many times. I could recite the entire movie of Star Wars.
And sold out every show, just about?
For a long time. But then I would go at night and I would clean the theater, which would take me 4 or 5 hours, because I was trying to keep as much money as I could. I couldn't go over this house allowance. It wasn't a great way to run it because I was dead tired, man. It almost killed me. Basically, I ran that theater. I reported to at that time, my dad's office, and I ran that theater. And, over time, I've run other theaters. But eventually what happened was I left. I got out of the business. And got into sales and ended up getting into software and ended up starting a software company with a guy, sold it, was pretty lucky on it. And I had been estranged from my dad for probably not estranged. We didn't get along. I just didn't see him because I was living in Seattle. He was down here. And eventually I said, hey, I'm going to sell the house here and come back to work with you. I had money in the bank at the time because I was able to save from my software days, and went back, took over his company. Once I went back, I did marketing, and then they promoted me. I ran that company. At that time, we had 10, 12 locations, including Camarillo and Oxnard, which we opened a week apart. I found that the Camarillo Theater was an old UA theater and made a deal, started negotiating a deal with them while we were building a theater already and almost getting done, completing construction in Oxnard, which is downtown, a 14 screen. And we ended up opening those 2 theaters a week apart. And then after a while, he wasn't building anymore. Things had kind of taken a lull. And I came to him one day and said, I think I'm going to start my own company. And he said, oh, good. Because he figured, at that time he was paying me $80,000 a year.
A lot of money.
Sounds like a lot, was not a lot.
Right, not for what you were doing. Yeah.
He thought, I'm going to get off this $80,000. I'll even give you an extra month pay. You could start your own. So what I did is I started the advertising. He was my first client. I started BeforeTheMovie, which is we basically lease the time between movies. We sell ads. We create content. We do the red carpet interviews, the star interviews and stuff, which we have over 300 and something in the can that we've done with, basically every star in the world. So in April of 2008, I started this company, and then we ended up hitting Inc. magazine's fastest growing the top 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in the country 5 straight years, which not a lot of companies have done that. That's not amount of money. It's percentage of growth every year.
You saw the opportunity because you had grown up in the business and you were just now, did you keep a construction arm to the family business? Were you guys still physically building the theaters, or you were buying and having them built for you at that point?
Well, we would negotiate, long-term leases, either take over existing buildings, convert them into multi-screen theaters, or build from the ground up. But having a, developer, we didn't do it.
Right.
We would just work the lease. We don't own a lot of dirt, didn't own a lot of dirt. We had some, We owned some, but most of them were long-term, triple net leases.
So then you saw the opportunity for Before the Movie. Corey, was anyone doing this at this point in 08? Was there anybody who was doing anything like this pre-roll entertainment?
There were companies, Val Morgan, Screen Vision, NCM had come into play, which is basically, the big three, AMC, Regal, Cinemark, put this company together and they're the same ones that did Fandango. But at that time it was analog, and we've actually had, I believe, the first complete digital show, and at that time it was on a DVD. I called it Back Row Cine Magazine. It would run this DVD from start to finish, and we'd time it to be 20 minutes, right? So it would start, and I had this software we developed, and we called it a police officer, a cop. And what it would do is it'd tell the big projector when to shut off and the little one when to go on. So it was just basically a thing that knew when the big one went off, it would start the little one. So we'd time it to be that DVD to be as long as the intermission, call it a half hour. So we'd time it to be 30 minutes, where we'd have 10 minutes of fluff or whatever, music and whatever. And then it would come in on the for the remaining 20 minutes up until showtime. And we'd produce this thing that was called Back Row Cine Magazine, was just content and advertising mixed in.
And no one was doing that digital version at that point, Corey?
They were all talking about it. I couldn't figure out why we were the last industry to go digital, to be honest with you. It's easier to protect the assets than it is using film. I just thought, well, geez, at some point they got to go digital. And they did. There was talk about it. At the time, I had talked to Screen Vision, who's the largest by screen count in terms of what we do. And they said, well, we're not going to, they were obviously telling me a fib because I was a competitor, but I said, well, are you guys going to go digital? No, we're not going to do it. So we had made plans to do that. We bought little projectors at the time, these little presentation projectors, but they're 3,500 lumen, 4,000 lumen projectors. And then we'd, get the throw them onto the screen, and it would run a DVD to do that. Now, everything I produce is what we call JPEG 2000. It's high def. It goes onto the screen. It's the same as the way the films come. And we play in those big projectors, but you have to be MPAA compliant in order to get on those projectors. So we produce what we call DCP, digital cinema packages. So we produce our ads that way, our interviews that way, and everything. So they start out as smaller files, and then they're small. When I say smaller files, they're HD and everything, but then they've got to be manipulated by software to get them to become MPAA compliant, to fill the whole 40-foot screen and like that.
When you produce a piece of content, let's say it's a 30-minute piece, end to end, is that uploaded then to the local cinema or to a home office and then distributed? Because now all digital, right? It's
all digital, but the way it gets there is a number of ways. There's some technology. The problem is when you create DCP, and you're talking about videos now too, the longer it is, the bigger that file gets. So if you're creating one, and so it's hard to get it there via the internet. Now we have some, they have to have speed on the other end too in order to pull it down. Basically, I contract with Technicolor, and they'll ship my national ads. My national ads can change weekly, whereas my local stuff is a monthly. I have a local show that's monthly, and then national ads that get thrown in, and they could change weekly, and those are shipped to the theaters via a deal with Technicolor. Or there's a second one, or we do it from here, from my corporate office where we have our studio and everything. We'll produce it and then FedEx it out so it gets there overnight. I can tell you that within the next year, most of that stuff will be obsolete. We'll be doing everything from the cloud. The problem is I deal with a lot of independent, small theaters in the middle of nowhere. They don't have the best internet connections. In those cases, we'll still be shipping them.
I would think bandwidth is still an issue. Tell me, or tell us, Corey, what does that look like? What is Technicolor actually shipping?
Little thumb drives.
So that physically gets FedExed overnight to a theater?
Yeah, basically they handle it, because what they do is they take the master files that we send. In a nutshell, national ads are a little different than local. Local ads that ad has to play on all screens, any rating, anytime. Whereas national ads, the way we sell it is by rating. It has nothing to do with the ad itself being an R-rated ad or a PG-13 ad. It is strictly because they know those are the movies that are out. They watch that too. So the agencies know that PG-13, I know that there's going to be X these movies that I want to be on front of. So I want to buy. So we when we ship it to the theater, we ship this ad goes on G, this ad goes on all PG-13, this ad goes on all R. So when they ship, they know where those are playing based on rating. It's confusing. What happens is you need somebody to help you fulfill that. Otherwise, I'd have my 30 computers here doing nothing but rendering shows for each of those ratings, whereas Technicolor can do it. They have the equipment, they have the facilities. That's why we hire them. So we upload, here's what we're going to do, here's the ads, here's the rating system, and then they do it, ship them from there, and they're gone.
Right. No, I got that. And then Technicolor is physically shipping also a thumb drive, Corey, to the theater, or what is going from Technicolor? That's what they're sending.
It's a thumb drive. It's ours. It has our name. It'll say Before the Movie on the thumb drive, goes out to them.
And then that just gets popped into some console that's the control.
They put it in their, what we call theater management system or server. If say it's got multi-screens, 7, 8 screens, 10 screens, whatever, goes into their, and then from that server, it goes to each individual auditorium, depending on what movie's playing there. On that auditorium.
Man, the innovation. I remember when I was an usher, the platter systems were just coming in, Corey.
My God.
And that was, I was an usher for UA. And
I've walked into theaters, projection booth on a platter system where the thing was running. I went downstairs to help somebody at the snack bar. I come back and there's, 5,000 feet of film
on the floor.
That's a mile worth of film just in a big circle tied up all around the sprockets. And I'm going, oh, geez.
Yeah, they had a system in, I don't know how many, it was 5. This was also an old vaudeville theater in Queens, in Bayside, Queens, that was converted. And I'm not sure what we were, maybe Stripes. We were running Stripes, Bill Murray Stripes, which is huge hit.
Great movie.
I saw that 700 times. With the platter system, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, they would run it from just the same piece of film across theaters. So they ran it from off of one machine, and it was, I remember it going across the ceiling to, from theater 1 into theater 2.
Yeah. So you would have it would start here.
Yep.
And in the theater over there next door where you'd tail it to,
right.
It might be 20 seconds behind or whatever. That way they could run multiple auditoriums with one print.
Right. That's what we did. And it broke. Yeah. And so we took down
not the best.
Took down 2 theaters. I had a mutiny on my hands, and I was trying to explain. And people were, if they had rotten fruit, they would have thrown it at me. I got up in front of a crowd of people trying to explain the glorious technology.
The film broke between Auditorium 1 and Auditorium 2.
It's called the platter system, folks. Sit down. So now you start your business, and you got traction right away. You have this great growth. There's competition in the marketplace, but sounds like you found a niche with the indie operators. Is that right?
Yeah. And we have about 175 locations, a little over 1,100 screens. We're the 3rd largest in screen count, but there's, you have Spotlight Cinema Networks, us, Screen Vision, National Cinemedia. Those are the 4 larger ones. Of the 4, you got to understand we're just a blip compared to Screen Vision and NCM. But we serve a purpose, and we're not just aggregators. We actually physically sell. We have a staff that sells. We produce the ads. We have green screens, 4K cameras, teleprompters, everything. We totally self-contained in the studio. I can shoot anything in there.
So somewhat capital intensive in that you have to have this production facility set up for this original content. And do you guys then write, produce, direct, cast the shows? I mean, you're a mini studio in a sense, no?
Most of the work we do for let's say advertisers and whatnot are motion graphic spots. It was capital intensive in that we have great software. We're constantly investing in software. And then in terms of the studio, it was either pay a lot of taxes one year or we just invested back in the business.
I'm just curious, is there a branded Before the Movie show with your host, Corey Tocchini, or something like that?
Yeah, and no, we don't do a host, but yeah, it is branded. But what we try to do when we do a circuit, an independent circuit or an independent theater, is brand the show to look like them, not like us. You'll see branding from Before the Movie on there and content we produce and that stuff. But the show itself, when you walk in, it should feel like that theater. Their website are certain colors. There's this and that. And so it's designed around them to be theirs, not mine. Having said that, we produce the Ferguson files, which are the star interviews and stuff. So they'll see it in their show, but I'll have another show in Phoenix or at Scottsdale at a movie theater. That show will feel like theirs, but it'll have the same interview segment.
Where do you have your biggest presence, Corey? Is there a sweet spot market for you, or is it fairly pretty broad.
It's pretty broad. I mean, I have more theaters in Michigan, so I've covered in Michigan. I have, obviously Northern California, Southern California. I mean, it's where we started, so we have a lot here. Nevada, we're pretty much all over. But I would say my biggest circuits and locations are between California and Nevada, and include Arizona in there as well.
Did you say 1,400 screens before? How many?
1,100 and I have to see post-COVID. I don't know how many are actually
I felt 1,400. I'm seeing growth, Corey. So I'm seeing you're going from 1,100 to 1,400.
Sounds good.
So right now, are you kind of mothballed? Where are you with this? Are you providing any content for any of your accounts open now?
Yeah, we have probably 40% of our locations are open out in smaller communities in other states, but it's coming around. You can feel it. It's starting to come. I can see that the attendance numbers are going up. It's slight. Yeah. Last year, we played to almost 30 million people. And when I say last year, I meant in 19. In 20, it was about 500,000. So it tells you the difference because everybody was shut down.
Yeah. Yeah,
but
of course.
We stayed in. We got a PPP, actually 2 of them, kept most of our people hired up until about 3 months ago. And we're down to about 9 people here from 26. But we'll bring those back as we go. We'll bring people back. And we had to do what we had to do to stay alive and keep our theaters paid. So we've been producing stuff during this pandemic. Be safe, stand 6 feet apart. We've been producing special ads and trying to keep the theater on people's minds. So we've been been playing all around, not only the country, but different parts of the world. And we've given it to them free. We produced it free. We made it available on LinkedIn and other sites so these theaters could, pull it down. A couple of big circuits that said, hey, can you brand that for me? Okay, so we make a few bucks branding it for them, but it's basically the same spot because we owe it to the industry. We have to do what we can to help the industry because if we don't, it's not going to be here.
Yeah. I like that. I like that spirit. Corey, break down for me just the fundamentals of the model. So I think you mentioned this before. Do you buy the time and then you go ahead and resell it? You make it on the margin, or what is the actual business model?
I mean, the theater runs so many movies a day in each screen. Between those movies, that's the time we negotiate with them. And basically it is they get a rev share. It's not anything in rocket science. We sell it. We produce it. We sell the ads. We bill. We collect. We pay them. We send statements to them so they know and they see what's been done. And basically they're giving us that time for a rev share. Pretty simple. And that's a percentage. And there's different factors that go into that. But we try to do is provide a minimum guarantee of a certain amount versus the larger amount, which would be whatever the percentage is.
Right. So you're giving to the theater owner a minimum guarantee on their rev share. On the other side, on your sell side, you're going to say, I own a dry cleaners, local guy, and you're going to say, hey, Jeff, we're going to get you in front of minimum X amount of eyeballs.
Take a theater like Camarillo. Okay, we're going to play to 570,000 people this year. Let's just use a normal year or whatever it is, 550,000. So there's 11 screens we divide. I would tell you, you're going to be on all 11 screens. And my question to you would be, to that business would be, if I gave you 15 seconds or 30 seconds in front of 500,000 people and you were on stage, what would you say about your business? What are key points? What differentiates your dry cleaning service from the next door or from the other guy? It's pretty powerful when you think you have a captive audience looking at you and there's going to be 550,000 people. Basically, if you're on for the year, that's how many you're going to play in front of, or 525, whatever that number is.
From your community, which is
from your community,
which is significant.
There are people that you know them, you see them at the market, they employ your kids at the theater, who knows, right. Because it's not like radio where you're using a shotgun approach. This is pinpointed. This is your community. So you hit that on the head. And it's powerful. I've seen some ads these people put together. I look, I go, the ad doesn't say anything. They'll have it. Oh, we're right behind Target. Well, are you advertising Target or you?
And this has got to be tricky because you're dealing with mom and pops who don't have the bandwidth, maybe not the sophistication, and like maybe it's with a begrudging desire. They want to do something, but they don't know what. And so that's got to be like dragging the horse to water sometimes.
Yeah, you just got to educate them and try to share with them and get them to imagine. I mean, it's how many thousands times the size of your business card. Think about it. It's a 40-foot screen. Some cases, I have theaters now that have 100-foot screens, 80-foot screens. That's massive.
You're bullish on the return of this business, right? Fingers crossed, toes crossed that this business comes back. People will want to get out again. once vaccines are in arms, as you said earlier. You're bullish on this?
I am bullish on it. They're already going back. I mean, even in other countries, they're having record. People have been waiting. So I don't worry about that. I worry more about content. When is the content coming? They push the content. I think we'll have a decent April. I think May, June, it starts to pick up. And I think over the holidays, next year should be huge. They've got all this film waiting to go that they've been pushing off. The James Bond movie, all these different movies that they've been delaying, not putting them on streaming like Warner Brothers did, but delaying these things. And eventually, when that stuff starts to hit, we're going to have a backlog of pictures, but not only pictures, tentpole pictures too.
Yeah.
Big pictures.
Yeah.
So,
and the pent up desire will be there too. You know what I wanted to ask you, Corey? So you were talking about the mom and pop advertising. When you do the Ferguson files or pieces like that, how is that just a gimme? Is that put in as, not to be condescending, but as filler, or how are you making money? Do you charge for that?
We don't charge for it, but what will happen now that it's gained a lot of traction, and it's going to be all over IMDb and Redbox and BestBuy.com. What'll happen is advertisers in any regional or local market, they want to sponsor it. In other words, we want to be in front of that on every week, every month that it comes out, every new episode. We want it to be sponsored by XYZ. So we'll get paid for that. We've been shooting the show for about a year and a half, plus the interviews we did 15 years ago, like with Robin Williams, and 10 years ago, and that kind of stuff, because those are cool, because now those are edited into what we call the rewind section. So those can be sponsored by or brought to you by a specific regional or local business.
Right. And so you've produced this, and in a sense, it's evergreen. I mean, an interview with Robin Williams is still entertaining, right?
Who's not going to want to see him?
Yeah, still good.
Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan.
Still good stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be, I mean, if I was sitting there, I would be entertained. And I go, hey, before the movie, I know this guy. And now everybody who's listening also knows this guy. So I want to thank you, Corey Tocchini, for hanging out with me for a little while and sharing some of your family history. I know we just scratched the surface a bit on the Tocchini origin story, but we learned that the exhibition side of the movie business is still very much family oriented or family driven, and that your world is hyper local. I mean, these are independent operators in our communities, and they're going to need everybody's support for all of us to get back up on our feet. So I appreciate
right. And remember, most of these theaters give back to the communities they serve anyway. So it's just all a big circle, man. We got to help them, and they'll be back. Trust me, they'll be back.
Corey Tocchini, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it, and stay safe. We'll see you before the movie.
All right, man. Take care of yourself.
That does it for today's episode with Corey Tocchini. I hope you enjoyed hanging out with him as much as I did. A through line I think we can all take from this is how important family and community always are, but especially how important family and community are right now as we move or continue to move through the pandemic. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, you can find No Bed of Roses wherever you find fine podcasts. Thanks, and see you soon. Bye.